Many people spend their lives searching for work, tirelessly pursuing jobs, careers, and financial security. Society conditions individuals to believe that finding work is essential for survival, success, and fulfillment. From childhood, people are taught to study hard, acquire skills, and seek employment as the primary means of providing for themselves and their families. The idea of work is deeply ingrained in human culture, often dictating self-worth and purpose. However, in the divine realm, there exists a different perspective. God never instructed his people to search for work. Instead, he calls them to live in faith, obedience, and divine purpose. When looking at biblical principles, it becomes clear that God's plan for humanity does not revolve around the endless pursuit of work. He designed people to operate under his provision and guidance. In Genesis, God placed Adam in the Garden of Eden, not to search for work, but to steward what was already provided. Adam did not have to toil for survival. Everything he needed was freely given by God. The plants bore fruit, the rivers flowed with water, and the land was rich with resources. Adam's primary task was to maintain what was already prepared for him, not to seek employment or labor in hardship. This divine order established a precedent that God provides for his creation without the need for strenuous searching. As people navigate through life, they often find themselves caught in the cycle of chasing jobs, worrying about financial stability, and striving to secure a livelihood. Anxiety and stress dominate the minds of those who are constantly searching for work, fearing that without it, they will lack provisions. However, God consistently reassures his people that he is the ultimate provider. He has already set paths, opened doors, and created opportunities for his followers. Instead of looking for work, he instructs his people to seek his kingdom first, and everything else will be added unto them. This divine principle emphasizes trust and reliance on God rather than human effort. Many individuals struggle with unemployment, career stagnation, and job dissatisfaction. They spend sleepless nights worrying about how they will make ends meet, questioning their abilities and worth. They submit countless job applications, attend interviews, and face rejection after rejection. Some grow weary and discouraged, feeling as though they are failing in life. However, God never commanded his people to engage in such endless pursuits. His desire is for them to rest in his provision and timing. When he calls someone to a purpose, he ensures that all necessary resources are aligned accordingly. Those who trust in him will find themselves positioned in opportunities without the need for exhaustive searching. Faith plays a crucial role in understanding this divine principle. The story of Elijah provides a profound example of God's provision. During a time of famine, Elijah did not search for work to sustain himself. Instead, God instructed him to go to the brook of Cherith, where he commanded ravens to bring him food. Elijah was sustained not by his own efforts, but by God's supernatural provision. Later, when the brook dried up, God sent him to a widow who miraculously provided for him. In both instances, Elijah did not labor to find sustenance. Rather, he obeyed God's direction and received provision effortlessly. Another powerful example is found in the story of the Israelites during their journey through the wilderness. For 40 years, they did not cultivate land, plant crops, or seek employment, yet they never lacked food. Manna from heaven was provided daily, water flowed from rocks, and their clothes and shoes did not wear out. God was demonstrating that his people do not have to live in the worry of searching for work, because he is capable of supplying every need. Modern society often contradicts these divine principles, promoting the idea that hard work and relentless pursuit of jobs are the only paths to success. While diligence and responsibility are valuable traits, They should not replace faith in God's provision. People are not meant to live in constant struggle and anxiety over employment. Instead, they are called to align with God's purpose, trusting that He will lead them into the right opportunities without the need for endless searching. Many testimonies exist of individuals who stopped frantically searching for work and instead focused on trusting God. They found doors opening unexpectedly, opportunities arising from unforeseen places, and provisions coming in ways beyond human understanding. Some received job offers without applying. Others were led to start businesses that flourished beyond expectations, and some found their needs met through miraculous means. These experiences testify to the fact that when people stop looking for work in desperation and start looking to God, they find themselves exactly where they need to be. The story of Peter and the miraculous catch of fish illustrates this principle beautifully. Peter, an experienced fisherman, had toiled all night without catching anything. Despite his expertise and effort, his labor yielded no results. However, when Jesus instructed him to cast his net on the other side, he obeyed, and his net was suddenly filled with an abundance of fish. This moment teaches that human effort alone is not enough to produce success. It is divine instruction and timing that bring about true abundance. Had Peter continued fishing by his own understanding, he would have remained in frustration. But by listening to Jesus, he received more than he could have imagined. This aligns with the truth that searching for work in human strength often leads to frustration, but following God's direction leads to effortless provision. The concept of divine assignment is key in understanding why God does not want His people to look for work. Each person is created with a specific purpose, and when they align with that purpose, provision naturally follows. Instead of searching for work, people should be seeking God's plan for their lives. When they operate in their divine assignment, resources, opportunities, and success come as a byproduct. Those who walk in alignment with God's will do not have to struggle to find work because their calling attracts the necessary provisions. This principle is evident in the life of Joseph. He did not seek positions or chase after work. Instead, he remained faithful wherever God placed him. From being a slave in Potiphar's house to being imprisoned, Joseph never applied for jobs or sought employment, yet God orchestrated events that led him to the highest position in Egypt, second only to Pharaoh. His journey was not about finding work, but about fulfilling his God-given purpose. His story teaches that when people focus on their divine purpose rather than chasing after jobs, they will be placed in positions of favor and influence. Many people fear that without actively searching for work, they will be left without means to survive. This fear stems from a lack of trust in God's provision. The birds of the air do not worry about food, yet they are fed daily. The lilies of the field do not toil or spin, yet they are clothed in splendor. If God cares for them, how much more will He care for His people? The mindset of striving for work often leads to stress, burnout, and disappointment, whereas resting in God's provision brings peace, joy, and fulfillment. Another significant aspect of this principle is the role of obedience. God often directs people toward opportunities that they would not have considered on their own. Many times, His provision comes in ways that defy human logic. Obedience to His voice leads to divine placement. Abraham did not seek out work when God called him to leave his homeland. He simply obeyed, and God blessed him abundantly. His life was not about searching for employment, but about walking in faith, which resulted in immense blessings. The story of Jesus feeding the 5,000 further reinforces this truth. The disciples saw a lack of food and believed they needed to find a solution through human effort. However, Jesus demonstrated that provision is not dependent on searching, but on divine multiplication. With just 5 loaves and 2 fish, a multitude was fed. This miraculous event highlights that God is capable of meeting every need without people striving to find work. Understanding this principle does not mean that people should be idle or irresponsible. Rather, it shifts the focus from searching for work to seeking God's direction. There is a significant difference between chasing jobs in anxiety and stepping into opportunities led by God. Those who acknowledge Him in all their ways find themselves placed exactly where they need to be. In conclusion, the idea that God said not to look for work is deeply rooted in God's provision has always been evident throughout history, showing that striving and struggling are not necessary for survival and success. Many people believe that they must search for work tirelessly, applying for numerous jobs, worrying about financial stability, and living in constant fear of lack. However, this contradicts the divine principle that God is the ultimate provider. He has designed life in such a way that those who trust Him will receive everything they need without unnecessary struggle. The belief that provision only comes from personal effort leads many into cycles of stress and exhaustion, but God's way is different. He demonstrates over and over that He is capable of providing in ways that go beyond human understanding. The story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden serves as the first example of how God provides without human striving. Before Adam was even created, God had already prepared the land, the trees, the rivers, and everything necessary for sustenance. Adam did not have to work to create food, shelter, or any resources. He simply had to manage what was already available. This reveals a powerful truth that provision is set in place before a need even arises. Adam's role was not to labor to survive, but to live in communion with God and oversee what was entrusted to him. It was only after the fall, when sin entered the world, that toil and hardship became part of human experience. This shows that God's original design did not include struggling for provision, but resting in His abundance. When looking at the Israelites' journey through the wilderness, it becomes even more evident that provision is not dependent on human effort. For 40 years, they did not plant crops, hunt for food, or search for work, yet they never lacked anything. Every morning, manna appeared for them to collect, and water was provided even in the most barren places. When they needed meat, quail was sent in abundance. Their clothes and shoes did not wear out, despite years of walking in harsh conditions. This continuous provision was not a result of their labor, but of God's faithfulness. Even when they doubted and complained, God still ensured that their needs were met. This example demonstrates that He does not require people to strive and struggle. He simply wants them to trust that He is more than capable of supplying every need. Elijah's experience by the brook of Cherith further illustrates this divine principle. When famine struck the land, Elijah did not go searching for ways to survive. Instead, God directed him to a specific place where ravens brought him food daily, and the brook provided water. Elijah did not have to work for this provision. He only needed to follow God's instructions. When the brook dried up, God had already arranged for a widow to sustain him. The widow herself was on the verge of starvation, yet through divine intervention, her little supply of flour and oil never ran out. This miraculous provision was not a result of human effort, but of God's ability to multiply resources beyond natural limitations. Jesus emphasized this principle when teaching about worry and provision. He pointed to the birds of the air, which do not sow, reap, or store food in barns, yet they are fed daily. He highlighted the lilies of the field, which do not toil or spin, yet they are clothed more beautifully than even King Solomon. These examples serve as reminders that creation does not struggle for sustenance, because God ensures that every living thing is provided for. If He takes care of the smallest creatures, how much more will He provide for those who trust Him? The key is shifting focus from self-reliance to divine dependence. Many people feel anxious about money, jobs, and financial stability because society conditions them to believe that their livelihood depends entirely on their own efforts. From an early age, individuals are taught that they must work tirelessly, compete aggressively, and push themselves beyond their limits to achieve success. While hard work and responsibility are valuable, they should not replace faith in God's provision. When people operate out of fear of lack, they often make choices that lead to stress, exhaustion, and dissatisfaction. However, when they trust in God's ability to provide, they find themselves receiving opportunities, resources, and blessings without the heavy burden of striving. There are countless testimonies of individuals who stopped desperately searching for work and, instead, placed their faith in God's provision. Some found job opportunities appearing unexpectedly without even applying. Others received financial breakthroughs from unexpected sources. Many were led to start businesses that flourished beyond what they had imagined. These experiences reveal that when people stop striving and start trusting, they position themselves to receive from God in ways they could never orchestrate on their own. The story of Peter and the miraculous catch of fish reinforces this truth. After toiling all night and catching nothing, Peter was exhausted and discouraged. Despite his expertise as a fisherman, his efforts yielded no results. However, when Jesus instructed him to cast his net again, he obeyed, and his net was filled with more fish than he could handle. This moment illustrates that human effort alone does not guarantee success. It is divine instruction and timing that bring about true abundance. Had Peter continued relying solely on his own understanding, he would have remained in frustration. But by trusting Jesus, he received provision beyond his expectation. Another example is the feeding of the 5,000. The disciples saw only 5 loaves and 2 fish and assumed it was not enough. From a human perspective, it seemed impossible to feed such a large crowd with such a small amount. However, Jesus demonstrated that provision is not limited by human logic. He gave thanks, blessed the food, and it multiplied to feed everyone present, with leftovers remaining. This miracle highlights that when people trust in God's ability to provide, He can turn what seems insufficient into more than enough. Divine provision is not about passivity or irresponsibility. Rather, it is about shifting from striving to trusting. There is a significant difference between working out of fear and working out of faith. When people operate from a place of trust, they find themselves in the right opportunities, guided by divine alignment rather than anxious effort. Many who have tried to force success through their own strength end up burnt out, while those who rely on God's leading find themselves positioned in places of favor and abundance. Joseph's life also exemplifies this principle. He did not chase after jobs or strive for positions. Despite facing betrayal, slavery, and imprisonment, he remained faithful wherever he was placed. He did not manipulate situations to gain success. Rather, God orchestrated events that elevated him to the highest position in Egypt. His journey was not about seeking work, but about walking in alignment with divine purpose. His story teaches that those who trust in God's plan will be placed in positions of influence and provision without exhausting themselves in pursuit of opportunities. Many people hesitate to trust God fully because they fear lack and uncertainty. They believe that if they do not actively search for work or secure their own resources, they will struggle to survive. However, this mindset contradicts the very nature of God as a provider. The same God who created the universe, who feeds the birds and clothes the flowers, is fully capable of taking care of it. Faith and obedience play a crucial role in unlocking the doors to divine provision and opportunities. Many people spend their lives tirelessly searching for work, stressing over financial stability, and making decisions based on fear rather than faith. However, the truth is that God never intended for His people to live in a constant state of anxiety over their livelihood. Instead, He calls them to walk in faith and obedience, trusting that He has already prepared a path for them. When people stop striving in their own strength and begin to rely on divine guidance, they find themselves positioned in the right place at the right time, receiving opportunities they never could have orchestrated on their own. Throughout the Bible, numerous stories highlight the importance of faith and obedience in receiving God's provision. One of the most powerful examples is Abraham. When God called Abraham to leave his homeland and go to an unknown place, he did not question or hesitate. He obeyed. He left behind familiarity, security, and everything he had known, simply trusting that God would lead him to a better place. Abraham did not have a detailed plan, a guaranteed source of income, or a visible opportunity waiting for him. He had only God's promise, yet that was enough. Because of his obedience, Abraham not only found himself in a land of abundance, but also became the father of many nations. His story teaches that when people trust God and step out in faith, even when circumstances seem uncertain, they position themselves for blessings and divine appointments. Another profound example is the story of Elijah and the widow at Zarephath. During a severe famine, God instructed Elijah to go to a widow who would provide food for him. When Elijah arrived, he found the widow gathering sticks, preparing to cook her last meal before she and her son starved to death. From a human perspective, she had no means to help him. However, Elijah instructed her to make him a small cake first and assured her that her flour and oil would not run out. The widow had every reason to refuse. Her resources were already scarce, and she had no logical reason to believe that food would miraculously multiply. Yet, in obedience, she did as Elijah said, and as a result, she and her household were sustained throughout the famine. This story highlights that obedience, even when it does not make sense, opens the door to supernatural provision. Faith and obedience often require going against human logic and personal comfort. Peter's miraculous catch of fish is a prime example of this. After a long night of fishing with no success, Peter was exhausted and discouraged. As a skilled fisherman, he knew the waters well and had done everything in his power to catch fish, yet his efforts were fruitless. Then, Jesus instructed him to cast his net again, but this time on the other side of the boat. From a logical standpoint, this seemed unnecessary. If there were no fish earlier, why would there be fish now? Despite his doubts, Peter obeyed, and his net was suddenly filled with so many fish that it began to break. This moment revealed that human effort alone is not enough to secure success. Divine instruction is what brings abundance. Had Peter relied solely on his experience and understanding, he would have missed the opportunity for a miraculous provision. His obedience to Jesus' command led him to a breakthrough that his own striving could not accomplish. The story of Naaman further illustrates the power of obedience. Naaman, a commander in the Syrian army, suffered from leprosy. When he sought healing, the prophet Elisha instructed him to wash in the Jordan River 7 times. At first, Naaman was offended by this seemingly simple and unimpressive solution. He expected a dramatic healing or a grand display of divine power, not a mere washing in a river. However, after his servants urged him to follow the prophet's instructions, he finally obeyed. As soon as he completed the 7th dip, his skin was completely restored. This teaches that obedience, even when it seems insignificant or unreasonable, can lead to miraculous transformation. Many people miss out on their blessings because they are unwilling to follow God's instructions when they do not align with their personal expectations. Faith and obedience are also evident in the life of Joseph. Despite facing betrayal, slavery, and imprisonment, Joseph remained faithful to God. He did not try to manipulate his way out of difficult situations or force his own success. Instead, he trusted that God had a plan and continued to serve with excellence wherever he was placed. Because of his obedience, he was eventually elevated to the 2nd highest position in Egypt, overseeing a nationwide famine relief effort that saved countless lives. Had Joseph focused solely on striving for a better position or seeking opportunities through human means, he may never have reached his divine destiny. His story demonstrates that when people remain faithful and obedient in every season, God positions them for greater things at the right time. The Israelites' journey through the wilderness is another example of how faith and obedience lead to divine provision. When God provided manna from heaven, He gave clear instructions on how it should be gathered, enough for each day with no hoarding allowed. Some disobeyed and tried to store extra food, but it spoiled overnight. This was a lesson in trust. They had to rely on God's daily provision rather than their own attempts to secure their future. Later, when they reached the promised land, they had to step out in faith and obey God's commands to conquer the land. At Jericho, rather than fighting through conventional military tactics, they were instructed to march around the city walls for 7 days. It seemed like an unusual strategy, but their obedience led to victory. Jesus reinforced the principle of seeking God first rather than striving for material gain. In the Sermon on the Mount, He instructed His followers not to worry about what they would eat, drink, or wear. Instead, He told them to seek first the kingdom of God, and all these things would be added to them. This is a direct call to faith and obedience. Rather than spending life anxiously chasing after provision, people are invited to prioritize God's will and trust that He will take care of everything they need. Many people miss divine opportunities because they are too focused on securing their own future instead of listening to God's direction. The disciples' calling further emphasizes this truth. When Jesus called Peter, James, John, and the others, He told them to leave their fishing nets and follow Him. They did not ask for a financial plan or demand job security. They simply obeyed. Because of their faith, they experienced a life of miracles, divine provision, and purpose beyond what they could have achieved on their own. They lacked nothing as they followed Jesus, despite having no formal employment or material security. Countless testimonies exist of people who have experienced miraculous provision simply by stepping out in faith and obedience. Some have received unexpected job offers after feeling led to leave unfulfilling positions. Others have started businesses after being divinely inspired, only to see them flourish beyond expectations. Many have given generously, even when finances were tight, and later received abundant blessings in return. These experiences confirm that when people prioritize God's guidance over personal striving, He provides in ways that surpass human effort. Fear often prevents people from stepping into the opportunities God has prepared for them. Many hesitate to leave jobs that drain them, delay pursuing their calling, or ignore divine nudges because they fear uncertainty. However, faith requires trust in what is unseen. Abraham, Elijah, Peter, Joseph, and countless others had no guarantees when they obeyed. Yet their faith led them to places of favor and provision. Fear keeps people stuck, but faith propels them into divine assignments. God's instructions sometimes come through small promptings, dreams, visions, or even unexpected conversations. Many people dismiss these moments, believing them to be coincidences. However, those who recognize and act on divine guidance often find themselves in positions they never imagined. A simple act of obedience, making a phone call, sending an email, moving to a new place, or stepping into a new role, can unlock blessings far beyond what human striving could accomplish. Faith and obedience require patience and trust in God's timing. Many people grow frustrated when things do not happen immediately and are tempted to take matters into their own hands. However, divine opportunities often come at the appointed time, not a moment sooner or later. Those who wait on God, rather than rushing into decisions out of impatience, find themselves walking into situations that are perfectly aligned for their success. Walking in faith does not mean living without responsibility, but it does mean releasing control and allowing God to direct each step. Many who have surrendered their careers, finances, and future plans to God have seen doors open in ways they never could have planned. They find that, rather than struggling to create opportunities begin to find them. Favor follows obedience, and those who choose faith over fear experience a life marked by divine provision, peace, and fulfillment beyond what their own efforts could achieve. Divine purpose is intricately connected to provision, and when individuals align with God's plan for their lives, resources, opportunities, and success naturally follow. Many people spend their lives chasing after work, striving for financial security, and struggling to create success through their own efforts. However, the truth is that God has already designed a path that includes everything needed for fulfillment and provision. When people stop focusing on survival and instead seek their divine calling, they find that doors open effortlessly, and what they need comes without the burden of endless striving. Provision is not a result of relentless pursuit, but a byproduct of walking in alignment with divine purpose. One of the clearest examples of this truth is the life of Joseph. He did not chase after work or seek out positions of power, yet God's purpose for his life attracted everything he needed. Despite being sold into slavery by his own brothers, he found favor in Potiphar's house and was entrusted with great responsibility. Even when he was falsely accused and thrown into prison, he was elevated to a position of influence. Eventually, he was placed as second in command over all of Egypt. At no point did Joseph manipulate circumstances to achieve success. He simply remained faithful, and every step of his journey aligned with the purpose God had for him. His provision, promotion, and influence were not a result of chasing after work, but of walking in divine alignment. David's story also demonstrates that when people are aligned with God's calling, they do not need to seek provision, it seeks them. David was a shepherd boy spending his days tending sheep without any ambition for power or prestige. Yet, because he was anointed by God, he was called to the palace. He did not pursue the throne. Rather, the throne was prepared for him. Even before he became king, he was brought before Saul to play the harp, demonstrating how divine alignment opens doors effortlessly. Later, his battle with Goliath positioned him for even greater opportunities, and everything he needed to fulfill his calling was provided at the right time. Had David been obsessed with seeking work or striving for success, he might have missed the moments that led to his divine destiny. Moses is another example of someone whose provision and success came as a result of aligning with divine purpose. Raised in Pharaoh's palace, he had access to wealth, power, and privilege. However, it was not until he stepped into God's calling that he truly walked in abundance. When God called him to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, he was filled with doubt, feeling inadequate for the task. Yet God provided everything he needed, from miraculous signs to divine favor. The Red Sea parted, manna rained down from heaven, and water flowed from a rock. These were not things Moses had to strive for. Provision came because he was walking in obedience to God's plan. His story reveals that when people surrender to divine purpose, they lack nothing. Jesus reinforced this principle when he instructed his disciples to seek first the kingdom of God, assuring them that everything else would be added to them. Many people live with the mindset that they must work tirelessly to secure their future, yet Jesus emphasized that provision is a natural result of prioritizing God's will. The disciples themselves experienced this firsthand. When Jesus called Peter, James, and John, they were fishermen. They left their nets, abandoning their source of income to follow him. Yet throughout their time with Jesus, they never lacked anything. Whether it was through miraculous provision, generous supporters, or divine opportunities, everything they needed was supplied. This illustrates that when people commit to God's calling, they do not have to chase after resources. Resources come to them. The story of Elijah and the ravens is another powerful demonstration of this truth. During a time of famine, God instructed Elijah to go to the brook of Cherith, where he had commanded ravens to bring him food. Elijah did not have to search for work or struggle to find provision. It was delivered to him because he was in the place God had called him to be. Later, when the brook dried up, God had already arranged for a widow to provide for him. These events show that provision is tied to obedience. When people align with God's direction, they find themselves in situations where their needs are met effortlessly. Paul's journey also highlights how divine purpose attracts provision. He dedicated his life to spreading the gospel, traveling extensively without worrying about his financial security. God ensured that people provided for him, churches supported him, and even when he worked as a tent maker, it was not out of striving, but as part of his ministry. His needs were met not because he chased after work, but because he was aligned with God's mission for his life. Time and again, he experienced miraculous provision, from financial gifts to divine protection, proving that those who walk in their purpose never lack what they need. Provision is often waiting in the place of obedience. Many people struggle financially or feel stuck in unfulfilling jobs because they are operating outside of their divine calling. They take jobs out of fear, hold on to careers that drain them, and settle for situations that are not aligned with their purpose. However, when they step into what they are truly meant to do, they find that provision comes in unexpected ways. Some discover that they receive financial support without even asking. Others find that opportunities appear effortlessly. Many experience supernatural breakthroughs the moment they commit to their God-given assignment. There are countless testimonies of individuals who walked away from conventional jobs to pursue their calling, only to find themselves more provided for than ever before. Some left corporate careers to start ministries, businesses, or creative ventures, unsure of how they would survive. Yet, God opened doors they never imagined. Others followed a divine prompting to move to a new location, take a leap of faith, or pursue a passion, and they found that everything they needed was already prepared for them. These experiences confirm that when people focus on their purpose rather than financial security, provision follows naturally. Fear often prevents people from embracing their calling. They worry about how they will pay their bills, whether they will succeed, and if they are making the right choice. However, faith requires trusting that God has already arranged for every need to be met. The birds of the air do not worry about their next meal, yet God feeds them. The lilies of the field do not strive to be clothed, yet they are beautifully adorned. If God takes care of nature, how much more will He provide for those who follow His plan. Those who step into their divine assignment find that they are sustained in ways they never expected. Provision does not always come in the way people expect. Some receive financial blessings, while others are given divine connections, resources, or unexpected opportunities. Many experience favor that allows them to accomplish things far beyond their natural abilities. When people are aligned with God's purpose, they operate under divine favor, which brings provision in various forms. They find themselves in the right place at the right time, meeting the right people, and receiving exactly what they need. Throughout history, those who have stepped into their divine calling have seen doors open miraculously. Missionaries have been provided for without seeking financial support. Entrepreneurs have seen their businesses flourish beyond expectations. Artists, writers, and musicians who followed their passion have found their work reaching far beyond what they imagined. Teachers, leaders, and innovators have been placed in positions of influence without striving. This pattern repeats itself because divine purpose attracts provision. Provision is not limited to financial resources. It includes wisdom, connections, opportunities, and even physical strength. Many people think only in terms of money, but divine alignment ensures that every aspect of life is taken care of. Some receive mentorship, some gain favor with influential people, and others find that doors open effortlessly. Those who are focused on their calling experience a flow of blessings that they could never achieve through human effort alone. Trusting in divine provision requires letting go of the mindset of scarcity. Many people operate from a place of fear, believing that they must secure everything for themselves. However, the truth is that God's provision is abundant and unlimited. Those who seek His will above all else find themselves stepping into a reality where they are always taken care of. They do not live in constant anxiety over money or opportunities because they know that as long as they are aligned with their purpose, they will never lack what they need. Provision follows purpose, and when people stop chasing after work and instead seek their divine calling, they experience a life where everything falls into place. They move from a state of striving to a state of receiving, from fear to faith, and from scarcity to abundance. They no longer live under the pressure of making things happen through their own strength, but walk in the peace of knowing that everything they need is already prepared. Those who fully embrace this truth find themselves living in a reality where divine provision is not something they have to seek. It is something that naturally follows them as they walk in their purpose.